Okay, I guess we're ready to go. I'm happy to be here. It's the last session of today, I think, before we go to the JCP party. So no hard feelings, but I'll probably the one who keep you between you and your beer tonight. But let's see. I'll keep it very informal, so just shoot questions whenever you want. If we don't get further into, than to the first slide, that's good. If I get to the end of the slide deck, that's also good, but it's not necessarily. I'll do some code demos rather than showing slides, if you rather like that. I am a Java champion. I've been coding Java since the inception of the language. I'm in the executive committee in the JCP, and also I've served in the expert group for MVC since its beginning. Earlier this year, I took over as the spec lead for this specification. I also serve on the expert group for CSRF 375, which is Java EE security. This is about the MVC specification. So what I'll go through today is a little bit about the status, what we have done, what's happened, how come we arrived where we are today. And I'll go through the basics of MVC, and then I'll run some code demos and do some coding and show how it's done, and hopefully inspire you to try it out and get feedback to us and see that we're on the right track and how it's going. So the status of 371. You remember this one from last year? That was when Oracle announced that they wanted to drop MVC. And I discussed it with some people at Oracle, and we were kind of annoyed that we couldn't continue with this because we were almost done. I mean, the spec document was brilliantly written already, so it's not very much left until we're there. We only need to write the TCK, more or less. So they didn't drop it entirely as they did with the JMS and the management JSRs. So we discussed, and in January they actually proposed to transfer it to the community. And we had the ballot in the EC and voted for a transfer of the specification from Oracle to me. So here I am, the new spec lead of MVC. Since the ballot was approved in January, the actual document with Thomas Curin's signature on was received in about May. So it took about 4 months to go through the process of actually having the transfer finalized. So, and our motto is controller or control to the community or for the community. So this is a community specification. It's all open source. We want to have community members contribute, and we want to give it back to the community, and I'll talk about that later as well. There is strong community support. There are 8, or last I checked, there are 8 user groups around the world who are supporting this JSR in the adopted JSR program. And there probably are more to come, because even though the trend today is to ship headless REST APIs in microservice-based cloud environments, you need to have some UI, and there is a market for server-side rendered UIs as well. And this is a very viable option to JSF, for example. So if we look at the timeline, we started this JSR back in 2014. And it was approved and followed the regular status, and it was pretty fast out with an EDR1 and an EDR2 around Java 1 in 2015. Since that, the activity officially kind of stopped. And this was kind of the hiatus in Java E8. But a couple of members of the expert group and a couple of non-expert group members continued to discuss on and off the mailing list, and delivered functionality and did evolve the specification, even though in this silent period. And some of those guys were actually added to the expert group later as well. So it wasn't totally dormant. It was slowly moving forward, but we were still doing something. And it was community contributions, all of it. So, and then at Java 1, it was announced to be dropped, and the transfer ballot in January, and here we are. So what we've done since then is that the transfer was approved by the executive committee in January. The transfer was finalized in May. We set up a new infrastructure on GitHub, and we've changed the license. So this is an old slide, sorry about that one. We have moved from Java.net to GitHub. We did it before Java.net was closed down. We've also moved the issues and over. We set up a new website and we revised the schedule. And what we need to do is to formally or use more of the resources in the adopted JSR program and get people to contribute a little bit more than we are able to do today. So what we've done is to we'll license it to Apache 2 license. It's fully open source, all of it, and that includes the reference implementation, which is called OSARC, and the TCK. So we open sourced the TCK in May, as Oracle is doing with their technologies coming up now with the move to the Eclipse Foundation. So what about the adopted JSR program? What can you contribute with to help us with this JSR? Well, first of all, just write code, use it, and try it out, and see where are we doing things right, and where is stuff lacking. Is it something you want in, or is it something you want out? It's all open because we haven't finalized it yet. So give us feedback what we should do. Is it something good or bad? Blog about it, tweet about it, show that you care. It's good things. What we also need is actually somebody who is a creative kind of person who can create us a logotype. Because when we launch, we want to have a cake, and we want a cake that is looking better than the JSF cake that they had at the Javaland in March. And the JSF logo is open source, contributed by members and voted for in the expert group. And we want to do the same thing. The other logos are beam validation and security specification. So all have them, but we don't. So if anyone wants to draw something, then please do. You will be listed as a contributor at the spec document if you do. So that's the easiest way if you can use a pencil. So that's about what I want to say about the roadmap and what's going on and what's not going on and et cetera. So let's move on to what's in it. So first of all, MVC is an action-based MVC framework. By action-based, we mean that the controller is defined by the application and not by the framework. And there are no standard Java EE implementations of this today. You have non-standard and other implementations, such as Spring MVC, for example. But there are no standardized in the Java EE ecosystem. So if we look at a pretty common visualization of the MVC pattern, you typically have a request coming in from a browser that hits your controller, and the controller updates the model and selects the view, which then accesses the model to render the view. And in a components-based MVC, such as JSF, the controller is defined by the framework. You know, you have the faces servlet in JSF. So you as a developer only implements the view and the model. And in an action-based MVC such as MVC 1.0, the controller is defined by the application. So you as a developer have total control of the controller. So it's a more fine-grained way of implementing things. Other action-based are, as I mentioned, Spring MVC and also Struts 2, if you remember that one. So one of the important objectives when we started this specification was to utilize the existing Java EE technologies. So if there were something we could use, we should use it rather than invent something. And examples of this are to use CDI, beam validation, JPA for the model implementations, And for the views, use whatever we have, such as actually facelets and JSPs, or other templates. But the focus was to use the existing technologies as the required ones. And for the controller, there actually isn't anything we can use directly, so we have to implement something or build something on top of some of the existing technologies. That brought us to some key decisions, or actually one key decision in the expert group pretty early, where the expert group were divided, but we came to a conclusion that we want to build MVC on top of JAX-RS. The alternative would be to build it on top of servlets, which also would have made sense. JAX-RS can also be implemented on top of servlets. So in either way, it's a good choice. So the JAX-RS was selected after a vote. We were divided in the group, but personally, I think it's a good choice. And especially as today you see, JAX-RS is a very much used technology for writing in REST interfaces, and to use that knowledge is one of the benefits of the MVC 1.0. So if you start with looking at the controllers then. So if we start with a simple class, in this case called Hello Controller, this name is not necessarily a very good name, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The first thing we do in our step to creating an MVC controller here is to add the @path annotation. And @path is a JAX-RS annotation. So far we're only using JAX-RS, and this is the @path for hello then. And then we add the @controller annotation to this one, and this tells the container that this is not a JAX-RS resource. This is a controller in MVC, and it will behave a little bit differently. And the important thing here is that in this example, I've put the controller on the class level. And that means that every method that has a public method and one of these JAX-RS @path or @get, @post, etc. are controllers. So my class isn't a controller. That's why the name isn't very good here, because it's actually a controller, and then every method is actually the controller. You can also put the @controller annotation on method level. And that means that you can actually mix and match a REST resource with an MVC controller and actually have everything in one class if you want to do it. Whether that's a good idea or not, that probably depends on your special use case. So that's basically the very simplest controller in MVC. It's just one annotation on a JAX-RS resource. So let's go on with the views. We have our controller as we defined in a couple of slides ago. And then we add the @get annotation, which is JAX-RS for saying this is a HTTP GET request. And in this case, we return a string. The method name is hello in this case, and we return hello JSP. And this is where the @controller annotation actually does its magic, because usually if you did this in a JAX-RS resource, you would return the string hello JSP. But since the @controller annotation there, it behaves differently, and it actually returns the view that hello JSP renders. And the default location of this view, this JSP page is in the web-in views folder in your web application. And I'll show you that later. I show JSPs here. We also support facelets. That's needed by the specification. And in addition to that, our reference implementation also supports timely, free marker, mustache, velocity, and etc. I think also we actually support ASCII-doc. And I think there are about 12 different rendering engines that we support, and those are community contributed by people in the expert group and out of the expert group. We also have a lot of flexibility, and this is where we are thinking of actually removing something if it doesn't make sense to have this flexibility. Because as you saw in a previous slide, you can return a string with just the hello JSP, the name of the view. You can also return a viewable object. And then you can actually subclass this and do whatever and implement it yourself. So it adds some flexibility if you want that. You can also go a really low level and actually use a JSRF response class and just have the entity being the hello JSP. All these are equivalent, they will render the same view. And we also added an @view annotation so you can have a void return, a method return void. And that's not allowed in JSRF. So this annotation makes that possible. And @view has another benefit, and that is if you have a controller class or a class with a lot of controller methods that all render the same view, you can set this @view annotation on class level as you would do with the controller, and those reduce the boilerplate and write less. So over to models then. In models we leverage CDI. So in this case we have a greeting object, which is request scoped. In this case, we leverage all CDI scopes. And this as the getter and setter is just a plain old Java object. And the way you use it is if you have this controller that we created in the previous that renders the hello JSP view, you can just simply inject your greeting class into this controller, and then you will be able to access it and for example, set the message in your controller method, or do whatever you are doing with your model there. And then from the view, you can access a model by using expression language. So this was the CDI approach. We also support a non-CDI version of it. In case your view engine doesn't support CDI, you have the same controller, so everything is the same there. And rather than injecting a greetings CDI scoped object, you inject a models object. And models is a class provided by MVC specification. And the reason it's called models and not model is to avoid collision with another object, class called model in Java EE. So what you do here is basically a hash map. So you just put the stuff you want to do here is Atlanta. I have been lazy and not updated the slides, but it could be in San Francisco, and then you put the message on the model, and you can access it the same way from the view. So let's look at some code. I did an upgrade to High Sierra last night, and that is nothing. I wouldn't recommend it if you have a talk the day after. I couldn't log into my computer afterwards, so luckily I had an admin account so I could again reset my password, but it works. So let's look at some of the code here. And I've created a very simple project here. And what I'm doing here is I'll just show you how you set it up with the POM files and everything to get started, and then we won't show any more POM files. So we rely on a Java EE web API. In this case, I actually run on Java EE 8, so I'll be running the demos on Glassfish 5. We also support Java EE 7. So you're fine with either, but in this case I'll run on Glassfish 5 and also some other servers. So you need to have the provided web API or the full API of Java EE, and then you add the MVC API dependency. And in my case, we support Jersey and REST-DC, so I've just created profiles for it to make it clear here. So if I'm running in Glassfish, or any server that comes with Jersey, I add the Ozark Jersey dependency. And if I run with, for example, Wildfly, which comes with RESTDC, I add the RESTDC dependency. So these two dependencies, you need to have the API and you need to have the reference implementation. And that is because we're not a part of Java EE, but we rely on Java EE technologies. I also have some profiles here for setting it up in Docker. I'll run some demos in that afterwards, but that's not the focus of this talk. So let's look at my controller class. First of all, you set up the application the same way you would do with a JAX-RS application, because we're basing on JAX-RS. So I'm using all JAX-RS here with the application class and the application path, and just add my controllers as you would do with any JAX-RS resource. And my controller is super simple. It just says returns hello JSP, so nothing there. And my view is put in the web views folder, and is also just saying hello to the world. So if I run this one, you would expect it should say hello world, and it does. So it's no magic there. We're not doing anything cool yet. So let's do something. And for example, go in here and inject the models. Like this. And maybe say model put message and Java 1. Like this. And then just return the JSP as we did. And in the view, I could say, rather than saying hello world, I'll do hello message. So now I should have a GET request coming into my path at hello. I should set the message on the model and return the same view as I did previously. So if I run this one, it should say hello Java 1. So now I'm actually interacting with the model from my view. So let's go a little bit further. And I've prepared another, here, I'll just run it to begin with. So you'll see it's doing exactly the same as the stuff we're doing. What I've added here is one more view, a form, that is just doing a post of the name to the controller. And my hello controller is exactly the same. So what I want to do here is that when I access this page, I want to have a input field where I can write my name and then have it to say hello to my name. So what I'll do here is to, rather than return the hello page, I'll return the form and run it. So now it says, it renders a different view. It's the same request going down to the controller. It's the same controller handling it, but this is another view rendering. So if I here, for example, write Duke and submit it, it will say method not allowed because I haven't implemented anything to handle a post yet. So this is all as expected. So what I should do is to add another method and use the add post from JAX-RS. And let's use a void here to do like this, and it doesn't do anything. So let's add an @view annotation and render the hello JSP. So now when I get a post, it should be handled by this method and return the hello page. So if we run this one again, I'll still say hello to Duke. I submit it, and it renders an empty page. And that's because I haven't done any updates to the model yet. So what I have to do is actually to take this message here and do that when I do the post. If I then run it, it should say hello to job 1, even though I say Duke here. And it says hello to job 1 because it's request scoped everything, right? Just per request. But I don't want to say hello to job 1. It's Duke I'm putting in, so it's Duke I want to say hello to. So let's access wherever I get to this form, and then I can use the form param JAX-RS annotation, and it is a name attribute in my view. It's called name here. So, and this is a string name. So here I get the name from the form, and then I can, rather than saying hello to job 1, I can say hello to name. Right, so I'm using the input. It's not very advanced, but still I'm just getting what I get from the form. So now I say hello Duke. So this is how it works. So I also said that we have some other cool small features, and say that you want to have some security added to this this post or this form. For example, protect yourself for cross-site request forgery. Then we have a simple annotation we can add here and say that we want this to be CSRF valid. So by adding this annotation, I'm explicitly saying that this HTTP request should be validated for cross-site request forgery. I could do it by setting a property and have it implicitly that all methods are going to be it, but this is the explicit way. And the way I configure that is to set a property in when I configure the application. So then I can set the get properties, and here is I set the protection to be explicit. So if I now run it, what do you expect would happen? So I write in Duke, submit it, and it doesn't show anything. Let me see if that's correct. Let's show this one. Go there. You see, I get a 400 bad request here. You would expect it to be a 403 not allowed, but that depends on the implementation. I think I'll run it in Wildfly afterwards, and we'll look at it there. What I should do to avoid this thing is that in my form I actually need to add this CSRF token that is generated from the server. So when I access the controller and renders this view, this token is set in my form and is valid until the next request. And so this is a standard way of doing it, and the way I do this is that I use the MVC context, which I also can access here in my by injecting it in my class. MVC context. So I can also actually use it in my method here to extract information from it. For example, get CSRF, if I want to check if that's valid and do some coding on it on server side. So what will happen now when I run it is that now I've set the token in my form and I'm validating on the server. So when I submit Duke, it will say hello Duke. So let's also check we also have some simple language support or internationalization. So I've already injected the MVC context. So what I can do here is to take the MVC context and get local and get language, for example. And I can just say string language is. So I get the language from the MVC context, and then I can just add here maybe in which language I'm saying hello in, or I could actually have a language string, which would be the natural thing to do. But in this demo, I'll just do like this. So if I now say Duke here, I submit it and I say hello Duke in English. And that is because I'm here, and have my browser set in English. So if I go into here and set another language, for example, there, set it to Klingon, for example, just disable these, and do the same thing. Let's go there, and say Duke here. And submit. Oh, didn't I go? Right. There. Enable. So now it's on, I think. So now it should say hello in some different language. So it will detect the language in a browser, and the default implementation, which comes with the reference implementation, is that you take it from the language header in the HTTP request. But you can also provide your own language provider and figure it out, whatever you want to do. If it's from the URL structure, if you add like German or English in front or in the back of the URL, you can just implement very simply that language provider to figure out which language it is. So let's stop doing this. There's another cool thing we have, and that is events. So we have added support for a number of events. So if I have can I have a private void foo, and here I can use CDI observers, and for example the after controller event. So this is a event that will be fired after the controller has been invoked, and I can just do whatever I want here. Sorry? It is a CDI event, but the after controller event is from MVC. Yes. So we have five different events defined. It's the after controller, it's the after process view event, before controller, before process view, and controller redirect event. So we have 5 events defined. And currently, I'm actually not sure if we, by default, support asynchronous events since we're running on CDI2. I think we need to look at the implementation, because these events, if they are synchronous, you shouldn't do anything heavy lifting here, because then you will slow down your application. But what we can do now is, if we decide that Java E8 is our baseline, we can rely on asynchronous events and actually do that. So this one should just be printing it in the log when we do stuff. Oh. Okay, it looks like we have to do something for to be able to support CDI2. So I wanted to show another thing that we actually support Java EE 8. But before that, all this is running in Glassfish. So I just wanted to show that we also support Wildfly or other implementations. So let's go to simple form. And get the font up a little. So is it readable? Samples. So if I build this one with the Docker profile for Wildfly, I would maybe clean package Docker build also and Wildfly Docker, I think I call it. So I'll just rebuild whatever I built now and just build a Docker image of it based on Wildfly 11 release candidate, and then I should be able to run it. Simple form Wildfly. This one fires up Wildfly in Docker and my application there, and it should be ready to go. Localhost 8080. .8082 it is. Simple form there. And it runs here, and if I write Duke, it says hello to Duke in English. So we actually support Wildfly as well. So we have a reference implementation that supports Jersey and REST-EC, and the others should be fairly simple to write support for. What I also have here, wanted to show you is Java EE 8 support a little bit, but since we are supporting Java EE, we support bin validation. So if I use the new email and say that the name I'm submitting in the form has to be an email, I can run this one again. Okay, now I have to. Then I want to go. Let's run it. The reason why it didn't work is that since I built it in command line with the Wildfly profile, I'm using the REST-EC version of it. So I just have to make sure that I build it with the Glassfish profile, and then it should be able to run. So here we go. If I say Duke now and submit it, it will say bad request. And that's because it's not an email. And I'm not handling these errors very gracefully. So if I want to, I see we have only 5 minutes left, so I don't think I'll have time for it. But if I write a duke@java.com email address, it will work. So you see it validates. I wasn't able to show you the actual how you can handle these validation errors, but we have a fine-grained control and a pretty cool way to handle each of these validation errors individually. So let me just go back to my slides, and we're going to be off to the JSP party soon. So if you sum up, it's action-based MVC. That means you build a controller in the application. We build on existing Java EE technologies, and we also support Java EE 8. We obviously have a little bit work maybe to look at to utilize CDI 2.0, but we support the other pretty well. We're built on top of JAX-RS. We support Glassfish and Wildfly. The plan going on for this specification is that during the last part of this year, we should be able to publish a public review. Then the plan is to have a proposed final draft in Q1 next year, and hopefully have a final release Q2 next year. So within 6 to 8 months, we should be able to finalize this specification. And currently we are on GitHub, and we're looking at the development with Java EE or EE4J, and it would be very natural for us to follow them to Eclipse. I don't think we'll go there before. I think they should be able to set up the project, just get it done, but we will start the dialogue with them and move it over to Eclipse together with them. And hopefully we can have some way of being incorporated into the Java EE or EE4J ecosystem again. The project page is mvcspec.org. We are on GitHub. We have the MVC Spec organization there. We are also currently in the Java EE GitHub organization, and we will be there until they move it to GitHub. Whether they actually move it and think that it's part of the Oracle codebase or whatever, I'm not sure what's going to happen to this repo, but we treat it as a read-only mirror. So whenever we push something to our repo, we just push to there as well. So we don't do anything other than that. The demos I showed here today are on my GitHub. We also have demos on the MVC organization. We have a buff tomorrow at 7:45. There I can show some more details about how to do the validation and stuff, and we can discuss a little bit of how to move forward. I know it's late tomorrow, and there's probably lots of parties going on then as well, but I hope some of you will come there and we can go through it. It's in this room. Yeah. And so that's what I had. Don't forget to vote when you go, and it's a green duke that is best to push. But feel free to push the others as well. We have a couple of minutes for questions, and if you want me to show you, I can show you the website. It looks pretty okay. This is how the website looks. A couple examples. I don't have internet here, but it also links to our GitHub repo where OSARC, that's the reference implementation. We have the specification there, our website, the TCK, fully open source Apache 2 on GitHub. We have some proposals where you can actually submit things you want to have into the spec, but we are not able to do it right now. And we also probably will put some samples and tutorials up there as well. So that's it. Questions? 1 minute for question. Yes?
You said it supports all CDI scopes.
Yes?
Is there one that's sort of analogous to HTTP session?
Yes, session scope for CDI. We actually support a custom scope as well. We have defined our own scope for redirects. So similar to Flash scope in Spring MVC. So you can actually keep the scope of a bean if you implement the post redirect get pattern. So this redirect scope will last for one post and one get.
You said it's based on JAX-RS.
Yes.
Containers based on servers. That would imply also that everything that's available in JAX-RS is also going to be available in MVC, and everything's available in serverless. For example, I'm thinking particularly about the HTTP server request instance for that request. That's going to be available. That is going to be available.
Yeah. So the question is if the servlet request, HTTP request, is available in an MVC controller. The answer to that is it may or it may not. It depends on if the JAX-RS implementation are on top of servlet or not, because JAX-RS can be implemented without servlets, and then you won't have access to it. So currently, OSARC is using a little bit of servlet stuff. And I think both REST Easy and Jersey are based on servlets, so we're fine there. But you can actually have an implementation that doesn't have the servlets. So you need to know where you are.
You still get access to the HTTP server request via the JAX-RS context.
Yeah, in Jersey you can, but I don't think that will work in other. So.
Now, I'm just thinking about getting access to HTTP2 features such as server push.
Yes.
So you'll be able to construct the push builder from the HTTP servlet.
I think that as if the JAX-RS implementation you're using is based on servlet and servlet 4, you would get it for free.
I mean, you get it with JSF for free anyway.
Yeah, it will be the same.
So it feels like there's a little more freedom with these controller classes versus, the old way of doing things in struts or JSF, where it's this strict request processing lifecycle and validation phase and all that stuff. Is that true?
Yeah, I would say that, yes. You have, we have, I didn't have time to show that today, but I'll do that in above, show the validation we have. Because JAX-RS comes with validation and supports bean validation. And if you have, like the email doesn't validate true, JAX-RS will throw an exception. And you can have an exception mapper that handles it and does whatever you do. And that's kind of a one-size-fits-all catch-it way of doing it. And that's not necessarily good for a MVC application where you want to have a little bit more fine-grained control and maybe populate a red something on the field that was actually not validated. So you want to redirect to the same form and say that, hey, the email field was not filled correctly. And we have support for that by getting the individual, and by bypassing the JAX-RS exception validation handling and inject a binding result and use that in your form. I'll show that tomorrow, or,
Okay.
yeah.
One more,
Yes.
all the time. So might the models contain, I think you said it was hash map, or like a hash map?
Yeah.
Might that contain like a detached JPA entity to represent the model?
I think it's actually just extending hash map. So whatever you can put in a hash map, you can use it. Yeah. Sorry? Have we explicitly said that in the spec? Then it's probably true. I'm not sure. I have to check that out. Yeah.
Probably because of the compatibility with
Yes, I think we're past our time and ready for JCP. Thank you.